Hi again, everyone. This is Janaína Pantoja here. I'm the Director of Education with UXPA International. We are very excited to bring this webinar and other educational initiatives to you. We have Simon Dermer and Spyro Papatanazakis today here, and they are the co-founders of Essential Accessibility, and they will share with us their perspective on how to enhance the user experience for people with disabilities. Before they start, just some housekeeping items. If you have questions throughout the session, please use the GoToWebinar control panel. We'll get to your questions throughout the presentation. So the speakers will let you know, and they will have access to your questions throughout, and they will get to them. So please, ask questions and participate. We also are recording the webinar, and we'll share the link with you in a couple of days. Also, so the presenters will also share the slides with you by the end of the presentation. So look for an email from us with the recording link and also the deck. If you have any suggestions for future webinars and speakers, please contact me at education@uxpa.org. Also, we have our UXPA conference coming up this year, and registration is open. You can find more information at uxpa2018.org. Simon and Spyro, thanks for leading this webinar today. When you're ready, I would love for you to introduce yourselves to everybody attending the webinar today.
Thank you so much, Janina, for your wonderful introduction. My name is Simon Dermer. I'm with Spyro Papatanazakis. We're both co-founders of Essential Accessibility. We're a full solutions digital accessibility provider. We first of all would like to extend our thanks and appreciation for UXPA for organizing this event. Second of all, for all of you attendees who have taken the time and have expressed the interest in learning more about this space. We commend and applaud you. We thank you as well for giving us the opportunity to speak with you. It's very, very encouraging to speak to such an intelligent group of folks in this space. We speak to a lot of different audiences from all different segments and functional areas within organizations. And I tell you, the user experience crowd is just being so solutions focused and such an engineering mindset. We really, really enjoy speaking and addressing to the needs of this audience. So without further delay, we'll jump into what this is all about. Basically, what we're going to hear today, because a lot of you are very well versed already in different facets of accessibility, some of this is going to be trodden ground for sure, and we are aware of that. But we make no apologies for it, because when we look out in the marketplace and we know that in theory that knowledge is kind of, it's out there, it's percolating, but in practice, it's not really being put into effect. So that's the overarching theme of what we're going to be speaking to you about today. It's really about mapping user experience and enhancing it to the people with disabilities segment. We're going to give you a high-level overview of the program components. We're going to make efforts to not get too granular, of course, because we're very, very tempted, being the fact that you're who this crowd is. But nevertheless, we're going to build on that. We're going to go beyond the minimum regulatory requirements and talk about customer experience in its entirety, of course, to ensure that nobody with a disability is left behind. So let's jump into it. We're going to give you some slides. We're going to run through them. As Janita said, we invite the questions. We're going to take some pauses throughout, and then we're going to run you through live use case demo of a user journey in a technology context. All right, so just a great reminder, why are we doing this? Again, as UX professionals, you probably know this better than most, but there's a market opportunity. There are people with disabilities with needs. It's 1.3 billion across the world. And in America alone, you're talking well over 60 million people, and it's about 1 in 5 just about that self-identify as having a disability. That's 1 in 5 Americans. So this informs their consumer decision-making behavior. So UX professionals don't typically need to be persuaded of the importance of serving the needs of everyone, but sometimes when you're speaking to your other colleagues in other departments, you need to make that so-called business case on why accessibility is important. Well, this is one of the notes that you're going to want to sound and the facts you're going to want to invoke. It's the fact that 1 in 5 individuals out there, there's a sizable market, and it's a matter of dollars and cents too, not just experience. The disability market, though, is not just limited to the sizable 1 in 5 population. Quite often, the definition can be extended to include the friends and family members of people with disabilities because their consumer decision-making behavior is informed by their emotional connection to disability. So when you project a disability-friendly brand and you signal an understanding, a sensibility, and sensitivity to the needs of this segment, that quite often can resonate with the friends and family members as well. And again, something you're going to often hear is, well, people with disabilities, they don't really have a lot of money. Well, there's truth to the fact that on average, from a socioeconomic standpoint, the collective spend per capita is lower for people with disabilities. That is true, but that's because of the employment difficulties and challenges in that the disability community is overrepresented in the unemployment statistics, which is an HR-related labor market issue that's continuing to be addressed. Nevertheless, though, there is a huge spend that takes place. People with disabilities need the necessities just like anybody else. They enjoy the entertainment and the disposable income allocations that anyone else does. So there's a huge spend to be made there. And so let's keep that in mind when, again, you're championing these initiatives within your organization. So against the backdrop of now having introduced you to the market and giving you some context there, we now want to familiarize you a little bit with some of the different types of personas or experiences that people with disabilities encounter that you may not already be familiar with. First of all, let's throw a statistic out, just again, reminder. This is put out by a survey group in the UK, basically that established the fact that some 70% plus of customers with disabilities, if they encounter a challenge with your site, whether it's related, obviously, of course, to your disability or not, they're going to move on, and that's no surprise. I mean, the UX community understands that more than anything. It's nice to put an actual metric to it, though. And for those of you in the e-commerce space who are driven by shopping carts and spending as well, you can see that with 10% of online spending, again, this is a market that's too large to ignore. So we've got some personas, some examples of people with disabilities. Again, you're going to be familiar with this, I suspect. People with vision limitations, what can you do to address them? Well, they're going to require, when you design your color, you do your color contrast, it's got to accommodate the needs of someone who's got color blindness. If you've got reading difficulties because of low vision, well, they're going to require a zooming technology. And if you're super low vision, almost blind, you're going to require a screen reader. And so these are the types of challenges that people with vision limitations sometimes face. When we talk about hearing limitations, what do we mean by that? Well, transcripts on your audio files, captioning, all your multimedia. Anytime there's any type of voice output, take measures to ensure that you're offering alternative methods for people to understand the content. When we look at physical limitations, could be caused by conditions, could be just related strictly to aging. It impairs your dexterity, your ability to utilize a standard keyboard, a standard mouse on a device to use the touch screen. It's going to be a challenge. You're going to need alternative methods to accomplish that. And then finally, one that I know the UX professionals are intimately acquainted with, it's more on the cognitive side and learning, people with dyslexia, reading difficulties, the types of things that you can do to collectively address the needs of this audience. So the big picture overview, the path to digital inclusivity includes the commitment to web accessibility compliance. We're going to talk about that moving forward. Everything you need to do to ensure your digital properties are achieving the level of standards and compliance that's required. Assistive technology, understanding the tools that people with disabilities require to interact with digital content, and the options on the market to provision them as part of the user experience. And of course, we've got this on the right channel for customers with disabilities is all related to how you as a brand, your organization communicates with this segment. And we're going to show examples there that we're going to get into. All right, so let's start with the driver of the whole digital accessibility agenda. It comes from the fact that people with disabilities quite often require assistive technology to get online. And so common forms of assistive technology that individuals will source on their own if they have the resources and the support mechanisms, screen reading technologies such as JAWS, you've probably heard of, NVDA, web-based ones like BrowseLoud, ReadSpeaker, there's magnification software, of course the speech recognition, built into devices as Alexa, Siri is becoming ever more pervasive. You know about Tobii Dynavox probably from your heat mapping studies and your eye tracking. You may not be aware that Tobii also offers great hardware solutions for people, quadriplegics, where they can move the mouse with just by moving their eye, that technology trains on their eye, touch replacement software, etc. So this is a high-level overview of some of the AT that's on the market. Of course, there's much more. Users of these technologies drive the need and importance now to pay attention to how you design your digital properties and ensure that you adhere to and follow best practices. So some common examples you've no doubt come across in your day-to-day experiences related to color contrast, audio, as we've mentioned, forms. You know, if an individual with a disability is applying for a job, they're filling out a form, they're making a purchase, there are certain measures that need to be taken to make them user-friendly. You want to be able to have alternatives for keyboard navigation, issues of visual focus. So there's a whole bunch. These are just some of the more common ones that you'll see and you're probably already familiar with. The guidelines, the World Wide Web Content Accessibility Guidelines, the WCAG, as you're probably familiar with hearing, are all about giving you the guidance effectively to collectively follow the knowledge and the best practices out there to achieve that level of compliance and user-friendliness that it's as welcoming a property or experience as you can possibly achieve on your end as a developer. This is a diagram put out by the W3C that gives you a high-level overview of how the components all fit together. So up top here, we've got the content. That's what you're doing internally when you're launching your digital properties. It's important that the tools, that they designed in such a manner and that they play nice with the assistive technologies that people are using. And we're also going to explore how, as part of the content, you can make some of these technologies and functionality and incorporate them into the experience for your audiences. These are kind of the main pillars of a digital accessibility program. You want to make sure you're evaluating your properties, you're testing them, you're examining them, you're monitoring them. You want to make sure your team is undergoing training, that your dev team is incorporating best practices to the best extent, that as feasible as that can be. You want to make sure your documents are being created and are being remediated if necessary in an accessible manner, and all your multimedia is conforming it. So these are the kind of the pillars of the program and the areas that you need to pay attention to ensure you're addressing all the requirements. So with that, building on that overview, we're going to drill down a little bit and speak to some of the areas where there's a little bit more confusion in the marketplace. And the big one that we encounter in our experience, speaking to just executives and folks on digital teams, is understandings around testing and what, as an organization, you should be doing, what you should be doing as a minimum, and what informs good digital accessibility practices. Now, the most important thing with accessibility testing is that you want to make sure you're doing functional testing, manual testing by users of assistive technologies who have actual disabilities. So automated testing tools are wonderful productivity technologies that many people leverage and are employing to the best of their abilities, and they can be a valuable asset and resource to basically as a first level screening mechanism and prioritization technology. But it's critical that at minimum, when you are engaging in testing of your properties, that at the very minimum you have a testing team of individuals who are people with disabilities, users of actual assistive technology. So you can do that. There's no clear single path on how to do that. You can build a testing team in-house. You can rely on a third-party vendor to conduct this for you. You can assemble your own network of virtual consultants, people with disabilities, to actually test these properties yourself. There's no one single path to conducting these tests and performance evaluations. But it's critical that at a minimum, you have people perform these tests and that you in some way validate the findings that have gone into the remediation process, that you really make sure that what you're delivering and what you're shipping is achieving the standard that you think it is. When approaching digital accessibility, when you're using tools, for example, like in an automated context, suddenly you're given a plethora of findings, identifications of errors, and it becomes very, very challenging to understand how to approach what really quite often appears to be quite an unwieldy problem. And the methodology you want to take is one that focuses on prioritization. So your ability to focus on what's critical, what's high priority, what can be put on the back burner and be down low priority is going to be a function of many factors, depending on the organization, depending on the skill sets. So we can't really get too deep into it in a general context in here. But what we can tell you is that whether you're doing this internally, whether you're working with a third-party partner, it is absolutely, it's good practice to effectively take a prioritization approach to how you tackle these problems and move forward from there. Because you can quite often find yourselves deluged with information, not understanding how to make sense of it, and it can become quite overwhelming, which we know in our experience can contribute to programs grinding to a halt because the progress really isn't being made at the pace that should be commensurate with the resources that have been allocated. Training is critical. There's no question that you want to get your dev teams, you want to get the folks that are working on the front lines up to a level of competence and experience that, again, is commensurate with their skill sets, their capabilities, the resources that are available. There's no defined single path to training. There's certainly a minimum level of training you would expect the dev team to have, and there are some organizations that go much beyond. We're getting a question from the audience on the audio. I'm going to pause for 1 second here. Are we okay, Janina, first of all, on the audio?
It's working on my end, so I'm curious if anybody else is having problems, because I heard from a couple of people.
And do we have any questions or no?
Just that one.
Okay, so we're going to I'll pause for another 10 seconds. If anybody has a question, jump in. Of course, we can let it go. All right. So with the training, so at minimum, there should be basic training that anyone on a TEP team receives. Of course, there are progressive organizations that go much deeper. And let's make sure you cover your basics, though, first of all, and at a minimum. And again, it really serves to prevent a lot of the errors that crop up. You can stop them from ever occurring in the first place with some basic level training. Regulations, again, the user experience crowd does this for all the right reasons. They don't usually require the whack on the wrist, thankfully, but other people in your organizations unfortunately do. So you're going to want to be versed in some of the requirements and some of the language. So we've included it here on the slides. In terms of regulatory, in terms of legal, there's lots going on. Flurry of activity. The ADA is being invoked continuously. in the lawsuits that are being launched, whether it's involving the Department of Justice or the private sector. So there's a whole kind of industry of contentiousness around this, and you know, we invite you to explore further if necessary, or to contact us if you're having trouble making your own organizations aware of the necessity of doing this for the regulatory to meet regulatory requirements. All right, next part we're going to jump to is the famous accessibility statement. There's growing awareness of accessibility statements, but the practice of understanding how to utilize, leverage, craft one, there's a lot of confusion in there. So what we want to do, first of all, is to first ensure that, number one, obviously, you need to craft an accessibility statement. And the statement, at minimum, it sets the expectations, and it speaks to a variety of different components of web accessibility related to standards. Where are we at? What is our commitment? What do we know? It's not there to tout how you're so great, unless, of course, you are, and to make any sort of false claims, which, of course, will come back to bite you at some point. Its intent is to basically establish the fact that you're acknowledging and understanding the problem, that there is a path forward, you are working on it, and it's to let your stakeholders, the audiences, the segment, understand that it's being taken seriously, and that this is a dynamic environment that is going to be subject to change, and that you're on it. So that's the important thing. And what we see a lot of in practice, unfortunately, is organizations going out there lifting an accessibility statement from another organization that may or may not have had an accessible site, but the statement purports or claims that the site's accessible, so you've got all kinds of misrepresentations going on. It's been posted by somebody who has nothing to do with the actual creation of the site themselves, so there's a disconnect between the dev team and the pros making legal team, and so you want to be very, very careful to steer clear of that. Go back to first principles, zero-based approach here. Take a look at whether you have a statement or not. If you do, reevaluate it, and for the ones that don't, this is something you need to think about right away. So we're going to take a pause there, give you a few seconds if anybody's got a question to jump in, and what I'm going to do now is we're going to explore an example of a best practices example of the types and the pillars of a program, the types of things you can do to really enhance the user experience with everyone with a disability, as we said, to ensure that nobody is being left behind. So the example we have here, if you want to project a disability-friendly presence, there's some things you can do that are going to go beyond mere regulatory requirements. One of the things you can do to signal that you're an inclusive and disability-friendly brand is to feature an icon in a prominent location, which intuitively signals that you understand the needs of this community, you're taking these proactive measures, and you're walking the talk. By featuring such an icon, you're intuitively making it easier for people with disabilities to get to what it is you want to spotlight, to help them understand what you're doing around this, to help your organization build trust with this segment, with the friends and family members. So we're gonna follow that line of thinking in this example, and this is from a customer-facing first-line point of contact standpoint. That's what you need to be considering. So you've got an icon up there. What we then proceed to do is we encourage organizations to communicate to this segment. And how we do that is the concept of what we call a brand disability channel. And what this does is when a user clicks on that icon, they're not just being exposed to a boilerplate legalese accessibility statement that really isn't user-friendly to read, and even lawyers don't want to read it, but instead they're getting messaging that speaks to and spotlights what the organization is doing from the standpoint of careers, products, services, programs that may be on offer, the organization's commitment. It's just a great way to speak directly to the consumer with disabilities and to resonate with them. And again, to put into practice and to elevate to the top a lot of programs will quite often maybe going on in the basement of the organization and just aren't getting visibility. And by doing this, it encourages organizations to do more. So a channel like this, in an ideal situation, will feature assistive technology for people who have trouble typing or moving or reading a screen. Again, if the website is designed properly, you're following your compliance program, there's still folks who need assistive technology. Featuring it here is a great paid resource to make it available. You want to highlight the career opportunities, speaking to the HR departments. The challenges that employers continually face is that they have great difficulty attracting candidates with disabilities. And part of the reason is because people are discouraged from applying, either because the forms are difficult, in other words, the web experience does not lend itself readily to the application process and they become frustrated, or they think the equal opportunity boilerplate legal statement is just lip service and the organization really isn't committed. So the sincerity in creating and crafting messaging like this, and that it encourages more people to come forward. And we've validated this with statistics. So communicating your message around diversity and inclusion, it's an ideal way to do that. So what we're going to do now is we're going to basically, again, I'm going to pause for a second, give a chance for anybody to ask questions, and we're going to hand it over to Spiro, who's going to take you through the live use case, the journey on the experience of a person with a disability interacting with a brand online if you're following all these best practices.
Okay, thanks, Simon. So we'll continue from there. And what I want to do now is show you a few examples of some of the things that Simon has been talking about. What brings a digital accessibility program to life? How can you create awareness? You're going to do all these great things around inclusivity from a digital standpoint. Let's bring things to life and create something that people with disabilities, and as we said earlier, friends, family, caregivers, and so on, it'll all resonate. So I'm showing you an example here in our work with Merck. That interactive icon that Simon mentioned earlier is right here. And what you see is instantly that this makes an instant connection and statement on the fact that this is a program to do with digital accessibility, hence the computer and the wheelchair. And again, you know, we've heard, should I use the word accessibility? Should I use an icon? Well, if you look at anything else that's related to accessibility, an icon is usually best practices, and I think people will understand instantly when you have an icon that this is more than simply a legal statement. When the icon is clicked, it opens up the brand channel, as we mentioned earlier, and you can see it provides the opportunity for individuals to instantly download assistive technology at no cost.
We're just going to pause for 1 second. We've had some reports that Spiro's screen is stuck on the deck.
There we go. Okay.
Oh, there we go. Yeah.
Thank you for that. Let's back up to the Merck homepage. So here is the icon I was just speaking about, and thank you for bringing that to our attention. I think we're back on. Let us know if we're not. So the icon itself is easily available, readily available here on the Merck page header. And again, as I was saying, when it's clicked, the brand channel comes up. And the brand channel offers the opportunity for individuals to find out about assistive technology, to download it at no cost, thanks to the participation of Merck in this program. But as we scroll down, you can see it brings to life Merck's disability program. Merck Engage, career opportunities, again, building trust from the standpoint of employment opportunities with people with disabilities, showcasing some of the research that Merck is doing, employee diversity. You can imagine if you're in financial services, you can have products, disability-related products. You can have on the insurance side, again, aging population products. So it really helps bring to life the program and not just treat it as something related to compliance and regulatory or just doing a good thing. Those are great goalposts, but at the end of the day, going back to the start of this presentation, when you have 18 to 20% of the population self-identifying that they're living with a disability, this really provides an opportunity to connect in a meaningful way and create that brand purpose. And so you can see here as an example, Merck. And again, I'll show you a few more examples here. Let's go to a banking. And you can see here accessible banking at PNC includes accessibility at the branches, how you bank from home. Again, you can see it brings to life the entire accessibility program being offered currently at PNC. Look at a couple more very quickly. Here's the brand channel for Hertz, a leader in the car rental industry. And again, finding accessible rides, specialty equipment. So you see, we've brought together a diverse workforce with some of the technology available. And as we head towards driverless vehicles, you can see how this will resonate more and more. Education, Texas Tech, here's the icon there. And let's even go to technology now to give you another example. Here we are with Samsung talking about mobile and accessibility related to devices. So I think what I'd like to do right now is show you an example and really bring to life how an individual with a disability or with different types of disabilities can benefit from assistive technology. Because I think, again, back to Simon's comment that assistive technology created the need for accessible design, building content with accessibility in mind. And I want to show you the benefits of putting those together in an actual example case here. So once somebody has downloaded the app, what you're seeing now is an example here of the Merck page with the assistive technology solutions on the dashboard across the top and the left-hand side. So an individual would have instant access to AT at no cost through Merck and a plethora of other sites. And they can now instantly test out different technologies available, everything from screen reading all the way through to a hands-free that we now will say the late Stephen Hawking would be able to benefit from. So I'll show you how that looks right on the screen here. Let's start with a hands-free solution rather than go through all the different types, because we have 10 to 12 different solutions here. So imagine somebody who's had stroke, paralysis, military injury. However, they've been unable to utilize their hands. However, that's been rendered. What you're seeing is me on the screen very quickly. The webcam locks onto me, and you can see now, I'll hold my hands up here. I am moving the cursor just by moving my head. So even a quadriplegic, an individual who cannot use their hands at all, can all of a sudden interact with digital content. And you can see here, it's pretty easy to do what everybody else can do, and they can do it completely hands-free. They can click by hovering over a link. They can type using an automated keyboard. And again, it's not only powerful technology, but it's also interoperable. So for example, if somebody were to need the hands-free technology along with a reader, that's available.
Products, research, inventing for life.
So again, you can use solutions a la carte, or you can combine them together to really create a powerful solution, as I mentioned earlier. An individual with Parkinson's or MS or CP, they sometimes use what we call switching devices. Again, it's a mouse-like device that allows for clicking, but if the individual cannot move the cursor from A to B, how do we get them around the page? Here's one example. This is called XY mouse. The X bar brings you from top to bottom, and again, you'd be clicking on a switch. A second click creates a target. That target is now your clickable area, and the target represents your cursor. Pretty straightforward, but again, extremely helpful technology. This is called radar mouse, same idea. And again, when you click, it sends out that target, which represents your cursor. And as soon as it's over a link, you can simply click, and it'll take you to that link. Now, the other thing is, New technologies that come to market for general use are also helpful to people with disabilities. So we talk about things like, obviously we've talked about things being read out through screen reading. Let's talk about voice commands and voice recognition technology. Show crossbars, move down, maximum speed, move up, move right, stop moving, hide crossbars, show grid, go to G3, hide grid, show grid, go to F9, hide grid, scroll down, scroll to bottom, scroll to top, zoom in, show the keyboard, hide the keyboard. So you can see with things like voice commands, with the head mouse, with the switching technology, automated keyboard, screen reading, magnification, you can see the array of different technologies that have really helped individuals with disability access content where in some cases they can best access that, and of course it's through the digital channel. Any questions on the technology?
There are some questions in the GoToWebinar control panel. If you want to take a look at that.
So Janine, are you seeing questions? I'm not seeing another question on here yet. So I'll continue.
I'm seeing, yeah, there's a lot of questions, and I think Joanne can see them too.
Yeah, see on our end, I'm scrolling. I'm seeing the I hear you fine, and they haven't come through.
There is a tab called questions on the dashboard. And I can read some of the questions for you if you want.
Yeah, please go ahead and hold it out.
Okay, so we have one here. Is there an option to download the universal assistive technology that works on all computers?
Yeah, that's a great question, and I'll expand on the assistive technology specifics right now. So with that lead-in, yes, there are constantly enhancements made, whether it's for mobile devices or covering off different browsers, for example, having an agnostic capability with different browsers, whether you want to use, Chrome or Firefox. So the opportunity to utilize these types of tools across different environments and operating systems is constantly being enhanced. We currently have an Android version, hence the partnerships with Samsung and so on, and we're working on a Mac version, and of course toolbars that, as I mentioned, are agnostic. So it's really straightforward. The individual, once they click the icon and download the technology, it's theirs to keep. This is not a 3-month trial or having to upgrade to get all the features. It's none of that. This is really a way for us to create an innovative deployment model to give individuals the opportunity to try the latest and greatest technologies with no cost to them, and of course still fully supported, obviously, and updated and so on.
Thank you. There's another question here. How long does it take to integrate the solution to an existing site?
That's a great question. So the integration is extremely straightforward. The icon becomes the interactive gateway that points to the, obviously the channel, of course, that we can create, and the assistive technology download. So it's really a very, very straightforward solution when it comes to deployment.
Thank you. Let me see what else. So some people are asking about the name of the application suite that you're using.
So basically what I'm showing you is the Essential Accessibility Suite. And again, it's a combination of all these different assistive technology solutions combined into really one application, giving people with various types of disabilities the ability to have these tools, again, at no cost and easily downloadable.
Another question, can the browser be distributed to others?
Yes, absolutely. In fact, when we created this deployment model, it was all about creating that connection with organizations, which is really, at the end of the day, people go to their favorite brands, or they'll go to an organization for information, government, utility, whatever the case. And again, we saw this as a great opportunity to partner with different organizations to provide assistive technology such as this, again, at no cost to the end user, empowering folks with disabilities. So yes, it can be distributed to any number of people. Any site visitor can download it. Again, there's no restrictions, there's no limitations to our partners of making this available. And internally too, by the way, we talk a lot about employment opportunities and building trust with people who may be looking for job opportunities with you. So we've got partners that are utilizing this in intranet type portals as well.
Another one, can the app be used with government systems or with other restricted security sites?
We've had those situations, absolutely, where we create like an MSI internally so that they can be used in specific cases, yes.
And does the code and design of the company's website need to be accessible compatible?
Yeah, that's a great question, and it opens up a conversation. So yes, so let me explain that assistive technology of this type, there's two things that are happening here. Number one, you've got what we would call alternative inputs to using a mouse or keyboard. Let's call that mouse and keyboard replacement. And those types of solutions will work, of course, just like a mouse and keyboard. When it comes to the screen reader, just like with NVDA and JAWS, you have to have alt tags for a more robust experience. So to the extent that you need alt tags with other readers, same idea here. And of course, just to be clear, as Simon mentioned earlier on that W3C slide, there's two components. Having the app up does not render your site accessible related to the success criteria of WCAG. Think of this as having a virtual wheelchair at the storefront, and of course think of web content guidelines and the success criteria related to that as smoothing out the ramps.
Cool. So we have we have only 15 minutes now. What do you wanna do? You wanna go ahead with your presentation? And there's so many questions here too. But you know, let's go with what you planned.
Yeah. So okay. So let me take you back now to the presentation, and I'm going to turn it back to Simon to kind of do a quick sort of a summary and overview, and then we can certainly tackle some more of the questions. So at this point, I'm going to let's see here, Simon. I'm going to turn this back to you momentarily. Okay, Simon, over to you.
So just we want to basically tie off, give everybody, let's just regroup and collect our thoughts and make sure everybody walks out of here with a clear sort of understanding on what the path is forward. You know, there are a lot of moving parts there, and we want clarity. So number one, determine your organization's current level of accessibility. So whether you've done nothing or whether you've got some programs in effect and you're on the path, it's good to take a proper inventory, assess where you're at, honestly, objectively, and establish that as your baseline and where you want to go moving forward. Number two, your accessibility statement. If you have one, check it. If you don't, you got to start thinking about crafting it. So that, at a very minimum, you got to get your house in order in that respect. Number three, whether you're already doing it, whether you think you're doing it, or whether you want to do it, at minimum, you're going to want to basically figure out a way to get access to the resources, the individuals, the actual users of assistive technologies, people with disabilities, to do the functional testing on your site. So definitely utilize automated tools. If you have access to proprietary ones like Site Improve or some of the other ones on the marketplace, that's fantastic. It's a great starting point. And if you don't, and you don't have the resources, you can tap into some of the open source options there. But at minimum, somehow you need to figure out a way to get actual users to perform that testing. Could be in-house, could be hiring a virtual group of contractors, could be a third-party vendor. Okay, you need to understand as well that it's a cliche, but you're hearing it more and more. Accessibility is a journey, not a destination. And that's really because in today's digital world, to use another cliche, it's a very dynamic environment. In other words, whatever you're doing to achieve accessibility today, well, tomorrow the parts have changed. So your accessibility program needs to be an ongoing undertaking to get you to where you need to be and to then keep you there. So it's not that you can have specific projects, specific sprints where there's finality, where you achieve objectives, you tie it off, you say mission accomplished, but that's all those are battles under the big war, and that's to achieve accessibility across the board. But the fruits of all this is to go beyond the minimum requirements and to look at this from the customer experience standpoint, what else you can do within your organization that thematically brings this to life, all with the view to ensuring you're leaving no one behind and you're projecting that disability-friendly brand image and driving that customer loyalty and level of satisfaction to really make you a player in the space for this segment, whatever it is your offerings are involved. So you could be e-commerce, it can be about shopping. In government context, it's about services. It could be just about information exchange. If you're in the B2B space, it can be very much about recruitment. So different organizations are going to have different prioritization goals when it comes to the specific subsegments of the disabled consumer or employee segment, but collectively they're all hinging on one thing, the work your teams are doing as user experience professionals.
So Janina, why don't we turn it back to you, and if you want to call out a few more questions, I think we've got about, 10 minutes here. We'd welcome the opportunity to respond to some of those questions.
Perfect. Thanks so much. And, I'm so excited to see so many questions here. And I'm definitely, just to let everybody know, I am copying all the questions, and I will maybe discuss with the speakers today if they would be available for a follow-up, a second session on this, because I can see how, the great interest in the talk today, in the webinar. So let's get
Jane, if you want, I'm looking at the chat here and I'm not seeing them. If you can be more specific, I'll pull up the questions and we can tackle a few of them still.
Yeah, but
where on the guide here, on the go-to guide.
Click the audience view.
Yeah.
Just open that. See what happens. Is that a box that opens? No. Oh, that's just showing the view. No,
yeah.
I forget.
Because they're not. I'm not sure why they didn't.
I can keep going here if you.
Sure.
Yeah, there is a tab on the chat. I think yeah. Okay, I can keep going here so it's faster. do you have any lists of third-party vendors that can test accessibility of your site?
So, as part of our comprehensive solution, providing the assistive technology really created an expertise in our ability to evaluate the different assistive technology working against the site content. So yes, in fact, we provide those services to many of our partners where we test sites right through with functional testing and, of course, individuals using different assistive technologies to create really not only findings, but findings that are related to really goals that are primary, secondary, and so on. In other words, we will create priority in our findings to ensure that you're remediating the most important functional aspects first, second, third, and last. So yes, we can provide those services directly.
Yes, just to make it clear to the group, any questions related to the presentation or resources or anything like that, certainly we encourage you to direct them to us, and we'll definitely we'll answer them all offline. So we apologize we can't do too much in real time at this point. We're trying. But Janina, please continue. But in terms of resources or anything in that respect, absolutely we can provide you with guidance.
Awesome. Thanks so much for doing that. Let me see here one from the beginning of the presentation. In regards to building new applications, are you creating personas for people with disabilities? Is that something that you are doing also?
We are doing that, absolutely. So understand that all the features and technologies you see are based on real live people, that we actually work with directly, even beyond kind of the concept of the persona. We can put we have real people that we have involved. So yes, short answer, yes.
Somebody here wants to hear about your experience with enterprise tools where employees with disability work. So tools for analysis and etc.
Sorry, what was the last word? Tools for what? Analysis?
Mm-hmm.
What kind of analysis?
Let's see if the person clarifies. Yeah.
Now, is that from the perspective, again, whoever asked that, I'll ask a question. Is that from the perspective of evaluating those tools themselves for accessibility? Or is it related to the technology, the app working with those tools? Because there's two avenues there.
Yeah, let's see if the person gets back with some clarification. Let's see if we have another question here. Yes, and people who are asking for PDF of the DAX, yes, it's going to be available.
Yeah, PDF and document remediation is certainly available, and it's becoming an important component of digital accessibility, of course.
Mm-hmm. And somebody here is saying that works for a nonprofit organization where budget is substantially constrained. So she's interested in learning about options for third-party testing that budget constraints can accommodate.
So again, we understand that, we hear that, and we see it. Everything from huge accessibility budgets to the smallest organizations. Everyone should be as accessible as possible. So again, that's where what I'm going to suggest is no matter who your vendor is or your partner, make sure that they're providing prioritization on the remediation side. It can really help. Again, you want to ensure that the digital team is remediating the most important and high impact areas first, second, third, as I mentioned earlier. And you work on it almost as a journey. That way, smaller budgets can tackle this type of work. So that's what I would highly recommend. And again, functional testing will ensure that you're not fixing hundreds of pages of issues that really should be fixed in more of a priority fashion. So I think that's where the functional testing will also help you, in fact, because you got to look at this from two perspectives from a cost. The remediation and the digital call it the fixes, and of course the proper testing to get you to understand what those fixes need to be. So that's what I would recommend. Make sure that you use priority and make sure you use functional testing. That'll cut down on some of this.
Awesome. There is a question about, to clarify the accessibility statement that you mentioned a little bit in the beginning. Is that public facing? Would it be a pop-up or banner you put on the website? How's that used?
It is public facing, absolutely. The accessibility is really a statement and a policy statement, and also a marker of where you are with respect to your accessibility work. Provides people with options if you know, they need more information or they want to provide feedback. So it's usually public facing. The icon is a great way to do that. And Simon, do you want to add a little bit on the statement?
When accessibility statements, from a legal standpoint, they emanated from the legal departments. So they were written by lawyers, for lawyers, and really belonged very much in the legal statement of facts on an organization's sitemap. But what we've increasingly seen in recent years, stemming from this legacy issue, is that some organizations were using the accessibility statement, the legal statement, as a consumer statement. In other words, thinking that this is there for the benefit of the individuals with disabilities to read. And that's the problem there, is that customers, people, the stakeholders in the community of disabilities, they want you to make your site accessible, but they want to learn about what the products are and the services and the employment opportunities. But they don't really want to read the fine print on the boilerplate of what your organization is doing, even though you need to have that kind of a statement. So what we're really trying to encourage organizations to do is to go beyond that legal statement and really craft a user-friendly page that speaks to everyone in this community. And this page can reference the statement, which you can include in your legal section, along with all your other legal kind of disclaimers. So that's what we recommend.
Awesome. We don't have more time for questions, but thanks so much. This was amazing. As I said, I'm collecting all the questions, and I guess I have your email that people can also send questions to you and contact you. The email is info@essentialaccessibility.com, and I'm gonna share this on the chat here with everybody. So let me do this now. Cool. Thanks so much, Simon Spario. I really appreciate your talk today. And I see a lot of messages on the chat, thanking you all for the amazing presentation. So
thank you so much. That's nice to hear that, because we can't see them.
Yes,
appreciate that. Really thank everybody for your time and your commitment. Cheers.